Why don't we get started? Thank you so much for coming. I know it's a little bit tight in here, but the good news is Professor Movsesian can go back to his home school and tell his colleagues that it was standing room only to hear his event. And we're grateful that he's here with us. The First Amendment Center welcomes you. I'm Steven Collis. I'm the faculty director of the First Amendment Center. We're grateful that you're all here today. Stay tuned for future events. We've got Nuri Turkel coming in the third week of October. We're hosting that with the Asia Policy Program. Nuri is he escaped from the China re-education camps of the Uyghur Muslims to the United States, and he now serves as the chair of the United States International Commission on Religious Freedom. He's going to come and talk about his new book called No Escape, about how he escaped the Uyghur re-education camps in China, but still has family there, and he makes the argument that China is essentially committing genocide against the Uyghur Muslims. We are very, very thrilled to have Professor Movsesian today, and so I'm going to introduce him. He'll give his talk for 15 to 20 minutes, and then he'll open it up for what I hope will be a robust question and answer session. Professor Movsesian is the Frederick A. Whitney Professor of Contract Law and co-director of the Center for Law and Religion at St. John's University School of Law. His work has appeared in the leading law reviews in the country and has been cited by the United States Supreme Court. He's also been a visiting professor at Notre Dame and Cardozo Law Schools. He teaches offerings in contracts, law and religion, comparative law, and federal courts. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard College and magna cum laude from Harvard Law School. He then clerked for Justice David H. Souter of the Supreme Court of the United States and served as an attorney advisor in the Office of Legal Counsel at the United States Department of Justice. Before starting at St. John's, he was the Max Schmerz Distinguished Professor of Law at Hofstra. And as an aside, he also had a callback to come interview at Texas, but turned us down so he could go to Hofstra. Professor Movsesian serves on the board of editors of the Journal of Law and Religion, from Cambridge University. He posts regularly at First Things, the Law and Religion Forum, the Library of Law and Liberty, and the Volokh Conspiracy, and co-hosts the Legal Spirits podcast series, which I highly recommend to you. It's fabulous. So with that, I will turn it over to Professor Movsesian. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out for this, and thank you, Steve, for that nice introduction. I should say, the reason I turned down the callback was for family reasons. That was it. It was for no other reasons than that. Well, thank you again, Steve. Thank you all for coming. This year marks the 50th anniversary of one of the best-known cases in the religious freedom canon, Wisconsin versus Yoder, in which the Supreme Court ruled that the Free Exercise Clause prevented the state of Wisconsin from requiring Amish parents to enroll their children in high school. The court applied strict scrutiny and held that the state's strong interest in compulsory education didn't outweigh the substantial burden that the state had imposed on the Amish parents' exercise of religion. In my paper, I reflect on an aspect of Yoder that wasn't especially important at the time, but that has become so 50 years later, namely the dicta in the case that religion denotes a communal rather than a purely individual phenomenon. In the course of his opinion for the court, Chief Justice Burger famously explained why the Amish constituted a religion that merited the protection of the Free Exercise Clause. I should say no one questioned that the Amish were a religion. This was Chief Justice Burger just going off on his own. In doing so, Burger famously gave as a counterexample to the Amish the 19th century transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau's choice to reject the social values of his time and follow his own spiritual path, Burger said, I'm quoting, was philosophical and personal rather than religious. By contrast, the traditional way of life of the Amish was not merely a matter of personal preference, this is still Burger speaking, but one of deep religious conviction, shared by an organized group and intimately related to daily living. Only such communal beliefs and practices could qualify as a religion for purposes of the Free Exercise Clause. Now, Burger mischaracterized Thoreau, who was in his way profoundly religious. Thoreau possessed an eclectic piety that drew on many sources, and that emphasized personal spiritual authenticity and the need to follow one's own devotional path. Thoreau didn't reject belief, he rejected organized religion. His piety informed a sense of politics and social justice. On one famous occasion, Thoreau went to prison rather than violate his spiritual commitments. The question Yoder's reference to Thoreau raises, therefore, is not whether secular philosophy can qualify as a religion for free exercise purposes, but a somewhat different one. Whether an idiosyncratic, personal, seeker spirituality like Thoreau's can do so. And Yoder suggests the answer is no. Now, until very recently, one could dismiss this question as peripheral to the work of the courts. We've always had solitary seekers in America, going all the way back to Roger Williams. But very few Americans have claimed to have idiosyncratic spiritual commitments that made it impossible for them to comply with civil law. In fact, when the court decided Yoder in 1972, 95% of Americans identified with an organized religion. In such a society, the question whether purely personal spiritual commitments merit legal protection didn't come up very often. Today, however, that situation has changed dramatically. A fast-growing percentage of Americans, the nuns, and that's with an O, it's not nuns like Catholic sisters, nuns as in none of the above. A fast-growing percentage of Americans say they have no religious affiliation, roughly 30% of the population compared to only 6% a generation ago. The large majority of the nuns are neither atheists nor agnostics. They're what one might call unaffiliated believers. People who, like Thoreau, reject institutional religion but not faith. Political scientist Ryan Burge estimates that unaffiliated believers comprise approximately 1/5 of the population, that's 66 million people. Moreover, a large group of Americans, whom Tara Burton calls religious hybrids, retain formal religious affiliations while dissenting from Orthodox teachings and incorporating elements of other faith traditions. When you combine unaffiliated believers with religious hybrids, Burton says, you may get to more than 50% of Americans. In short, there are many more Henry David Thoreaus than there used to be. And they've started to appear in the cases, slowly but perceptibly, including recent challenges to vaccine mandates in the context of COVID-19 and other contagious diseases. In some of these cases, plaintiffs with idiosyncratic beliefs have sought religious exemptions under the Free Exercise Clause or Title VII or other federal and state laws. Now, most of the cases hold that religious exemptions cannot be limited to communal beliefs, although most also hold that mandates are legal and that exemptions aren't required. But the rapid rise in unaffiliated believers has made non-institutional religion a real issue. And as I show in the paper, some lower courts have questioned whether idiosyncratic beliefs, disconnected from a communal tradition, can qualify as a religion at all. Recent changes in the Supreme Court's free exercise jurisprudence have raised the stakes. In the past couple of terms, in cases like Fulton versus City of Philadelphia and Tandon versus Newsom, the court has dramatically expanded the possibility of receiving a religious exemption from civil laws. Those cases have adopted the so-called most favored nation theory of religious exemptions, which holds that the denial of a religious exemption is presumptively unconstitutional and subject to strict scrutiny where the state treats some comparable secular activities more favorably than religious activities. If the court means what it says in these cases, and you can never know for sure, qualifying as a religion will offer significant benefits to litigants. So we should expect to see an increase in the number of claims that objections to legal requirements are in fact religious in character. 50 years later then, it's a good moment to reflect on what Yoder's dicta about the communal nature of religion mean in a very different America, the America we have today, where 66 million people claim, like Thoreau, to follow their own spiritual paths. In the paper, I do three things. First, I describe the relevant Supreme Court case law, including, of course, Yoder itself. In two cases that followed Yoder in the 1980s, Thomas versus Review Board and Frazee versus Illinois Department of Employment Security, the court held that an individual's religious convictions, even if not everyone in his religious community shares them, merit the protection of the Free Exercise Clause, and that a claimant need not be a member of an organized religion to receive a religious exemption. Now, those cases are obviously in tension with Yoder. Neither of them disavow Yoder's dicta, however, and as I try to explain in the paper, both cases contain language that suggests that Free Exercise Clause claims do not protect completely idiosyncratic and non-institutional beliefs and practices. Following the thread is difficult, but taken together, I argue, the cases suggest that the existence of a religious community remains relevant to the definition of a religion for legal purposes. That's the first thing I do. Second, I explore the large increase in the numbers of unaffiliated believers over the last 30 years and show how it's beginning to affect the case law. Scholars debate why this is occurring, why this large-scale religious disaffiliation is occurring. It appears particularly pronounced among younger Americans. Many factors may play a role, including high rates of divorce and religious intermarriage, generational replacement, and shifting ideas about sexuality and gender, which may tend to alienate Americans, especially younger Americans, from the traditional views that most organized religions continue to hold. The rise of the religiously unaffiliated may also reflect the growing polarization of American culture generally. Americans with strong religious identities appear to maintain them over time. The unaffiliated tend to come from the ranks of the nominally committed, that is, people who formally identify with a religion but show only modest levels of interest and commitment. As in so many areas of life, in religion, Americans seem to be moving to the extremes on either end, while the middle disappears. In the paper, I describe how some lower courts have begun to address claims for religious exemptions based on idiosyncratic beliefs, and I focus particularly on vaccine and mask mandates in connection with COVID-19 and other diseases. Actually, much, although certainly not all, of the anti-vaxxer movement turns out to be based in a kind of unaffiliated or hybrid spirituality, which Tara Burton calls wellness culture, and which I describe in the paper. I suspect Thoreau would have found wellness culture quite congenial. Finally, I argue that Yoder's dicta about the communal nature of religion is basically correct. The existence of a community of believers is a crucial factor, I argue, in a plausible definition of religion for legal purposes. Now, of course, I recognize that defining religion is notoriously complicated, and that many scholars think it's not worth the effort. In fact, many scholars, including some in this institution, argue that singling out religion, whatever it is, for constitutional purposes is morally illegitimate, and that courts should expand the category to include a variety of associational interests that implicate the same concerns, a strategy that, of course, would make a clear definition of religion unnecessary. Those are plausible arguments, but I explain in the paper that I reject them. The operative legal texts, I'm talking here about the Free Exercise Clause and RFRA and other statutes, Title VII, for example, they all require courts to define religion somehow. And the Supreme Court has made clear that it continues to understand religion as a distinct and special legal category, and that it doesn't think that doing so violates the Establishment Clause. Notwithstanding the difficulties that scholars have identified then, I don't think courts can just avoid the question of defining religion for legal purposes. Now, the best method for defining religion, I think, and the one that I adopt in my paper, is the familiar analogical approach associated most closely with Kent Greenewald. That flexible approach recognizes that no single factor can capture the full complexity of religion. Instead, it asks how closely a phenomenon resembles something that everyone would concede to be a religion. The closer the family resemblance, quote unquote, the more likely the phenomenon qualifies. And under the Greenewald approach, the multi-factor approach, courts would do this based on factors that can be divided into three categories: beliefs, practices, and organizations. That last one to me is very important. I would argue that a crucial factor in the existence of a religion is a community of believers. And in the paper, I explain why I think so, for several reasons. First, legal definitions should be consistent with social reality and cultural expectations. And in common understanding, religion has always suggested a collective phenomenon. In lived experience, religion suggests a group of people linked with one another through time in worship. Communal memory and authority give religion much of its power. Indeed, as sociologist Christian Smith writes, quote, "In the absence of inherited historical traditions, most new religious movements invent them as needed." Second, a focus on community jives with an important goal of religious freedom in the liberal state, promoting private associations that encourage cooperative projects and check state power. About the same time that Thoreau was building his cabin on Walden Pond, another perceptive observer of American life, Alexis de Tocqueville, explained why this is so. By encouraging people to identify with and look out for one another, Tocqueville wrote, private associations militate against the self-centeredness and social isolation that liberalism tends to promote, and that Thoreau, in his way, embodied. Thoreau found his solitude beneficial, but social isolation can also facilitate the rise of despotism. The despotic state desires nothing more than for individual citizens to feel isolated from and indifferent to others, so that it can easily divide and dominate them all. By promoting cooperation and helping to hold state actors to account, private associations thus perform necessary functions in a democracy. And religious groups perform these functions especially well. Compared to other private associations, sociologist Robert Putnam writes, membership in religious groups is most closely associated with forms of civic involvement, like voting, jury service, community projects, talking with neighbors, and giving to charity. Regular churchgoers are more likely to work on community projects, I'm quoting now still Putnam, participate in town meetings and other political activities, and to press for social reform. It's institutional religion, not the Thoreauvian beliefs of isolated individuals, that offers the most potential for uniting people in voluntary enterprises. Third, the existence of a religious community reduces the possibility of fraudulent claims and can provide powerful objective evidence of the claimant's good faith. Everyone agrees that courts need not honor a religious claim that a litigant doesn't actually hold or raises merely as a pretext. But religious sincerity, which inevitably depends on a claimant's subjective state of mind, is notoriously difficult for courts to evaluate. The existence of a religious community to which the claimant belongs can provide powerful evidence of the claimant's good faith. Fourth, the existence of a community helps ensure that religious claims are based on deep convictions rather than ephemeral notions, that the claims are not frivolous and fleeting, but serious. Now, of course, not all idiosyncratic commitments are frivolous and fleeting. They're not all ephemeral, of course. Beliefs can be worthy of respect, even if they're novel and personal. But an institutional religion with an organized structure and tradition seems to me more likely to promote the sort of serious convictions that should most command the state's respect. Fifth, and finally, making the definition of religion turn at least in part on the existence of a religious community can reduce the potential for administrative disorder. Long ago, the Supreme Court warned that if personal spiritual convictions were sufficient to override legal objections, anarchy could result. I'm quoting, every citizen would become a law unto himself. Steve and I were talking about this earlier today. Now, one shouldn't overstate this concern, but as I explained in the paper, I think the rise of the nuns makes it especially important today. Requiring a claimant to show that his or her objections aren't merely personal, but derived from the teachings of an organized body of believers obviously reduces the potential for conflict with state laws, especially in a society where large numbers claim to follow their own spiritual paths. Okay, now having said all of that, I want to be clear. I would not categorically limit religion to collective beliefs and practices. Doing so would create two serious problems. First, categorically excluding non-institutional idiosyncratic beliefs would contradict a long American tradition of honoring individual religious conscience, as well as religious communities. Unaffiliated believers like Thoreau and his spiritual descendants reflect something important about our culture, about the way we historically have understood religion in America and the way we continue to understand it today. Notwithstanding the problems of alienation, anomie, and unserious claims, honoring individual religious conscience promotes the important values of autonomy, dignity, and personal well-being. Declining entirely to protect idiosyncratic claims would slight those important values, and in my view would depart too much from our long tradition to be legitimate. Second, limiting religion exclusively to communal beliefs and practices would entail difficult line-drawing problems. For example, in identifying religious communities and what they teach. Most religions, especially if they've existed for any length of time, have both majority and minority strains. And religions that have existed for millennia typically have many expressions. Determining which expression among many qualifies as the quote-unquote true representative of a religious tradition can be very difficult. Moreover, religious doctrines and structures can change over time. At any given moment, it might not be so clear, and I'm speaking purely as a descriptive matter, not a theological matter, it might not be so clear what the position of a religion is. The best approach, I argue, would be to adopt a sliding scale. The closer one can tie one's beliefs and practices to those of an established religious community, the more one's claims can qualify as religious for legal purposes. That's my argument. Conversely, the farther one gets from a religious community, the more idiosyncratic one's spiritual path, the less plausible it is to claim that one is exercising a religion for legal purposes. And I explain how this would work in the paper using Thomas and Frazee, those cases I talked about earlier, and also one of the recent vaccine mandate cases as examples of what I mean. Now, to be sure, the approach that I suggest here does not resolve cases in the manner of a bright line rule. It turns on the facts and depends a great deal on judgment. And I will confess, in any particular case, under my approach, whether a claim qualifies as religious or not may be genuinely uncertain. Line drawing problems will remain. Nonetheless, I argue that by making the existence of a religious community a crucial factor, the approach offers the benefits of tying religion to common understandings and avoiding the problems associated with defining religion in purely idiosyncratic terms, while remaining true to our cultural and legal traditions and minimizing the difficulties that a more categorical approach would entail. Okay, I think that's my time. I'll stop there. Thank you again for coming, and I'm happy to take any questions. And I guess there's not a queue. We'll just call on people.
Yeah, I think students are not used to the queue system,
okay.
So we will just do it. Professors are, but students are not. So please ask your questions. Mark, if I could just ask, could you please repeat the question so when it gets picked up on video?
Sure.
Down here.
Oh, there you go, Warren.
Yes. So obviously, to the extent we're looking at the Constitution for different religious claims, at least the current Supreme Court majority and a lot of federal judges, a lot of judges in general, would look to the original public meaning of the word religion. So I'm curious, obviously that kind of question very much comes down to a judge's judicial philosophy. So in cases that have already been decided and going forward, and the scholarship too, how is that debate, how is that interpretation played out?
That's an excellent question. The question is, in terms of originalism, and specifically the version of originalism that's called original public meaning originalism, what is the definition of religion and how would that impact things? Is that about right? Okay. And original public meaning originalism is the idea that in determining what the words of the Constitution mean, you look to what they would have meant to the people at the time, and not just experts, but people who ratified the Constitution. So I think that's a very interesting question. I think, and I should say my paper is not an originalist paper, so I kind of try to bracket this particular point. It's not clear exactly what the framers meant by religion. As you may know, when they were debating the text of the First Amendment and when they were ratifying the text of the First Amendment, they didn't debate it a lot. Actually, the records of the debate about the First Amendment are very sparse, which leads some scholars to suggest they didn't mean to do very much at all in the First Amendment. Maybe they just meant to kind of, cabin the federal government's role and not much more than that. However, I do make this point in one of the footnotes in the paper. I think you can look at the phrase free exercise of religion, and to me, it connotes a communal rather than an individual thing. Why? Because we do know that the framers did reject the phrase rights of conscience in the First Amendment. They specifically, that rights of conscience was in one of the original drafts, and it got taken out in favor of free exercise of religion. To me, and I think to people at the time, the word conscience would connote an individual thing, my individual personal thing. And the fact that they took that out and they focused on religion, to my mind, suggests they were thinking about this in communal terms. But I can't say that for sure, and I don't want to put too much on that, because I don't think the evidence is there. If it is, I haven't seen it. They did think that deism was a kind of religion, and deism was not necessarily an organized religion, but it wasn't just my own personal conscience. I mean, there was a kind of understanding of deism. So that's what I'd say. So it's just not clear. To me, it seems communal, but I would confess that I can't be 100% on that. That is, don't tell me, Meg?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I have a question just to make sure I understand the argument, so more clarifying. Is the sliding scale approach not necessarily like a principled decision based on like institutionalized religion being more valuable than individualized spiritual religion, so to speak? Or is it seems, I guess, to me, more of a strategic way of determining what actually, like you're talking about sincerity, what actually qualifies as a religion if someone's actually holding, and also strategic in that we should support institutionalized religion because the institutionalized religions are more beneficial to society and their voluntary association and other aspects.
Yeah, okay, so the question is the approach I'm advocating here, the sliding scale approach, is it more principled or strategic? And I guess, as a scholar, I say, of course it's principled. It's not strategic at all. And strategic, if I understand you, you mean in the sense of that organized religion offers more, what is the distinction you're making there?
As far as the strategic?
Yeah.
Well, I guess to boil it down, it seems, I'm just trying to discern if you see there's actually a difference in value between people who hold beliefs of a religion or just of themselves versus saying that legally we should support more clearly institutionalized religion because it's difficult to discern sincerity. So it's more, in that sense, strategic, and also would support all of the benefits that flow from institutionalized religion.
Yeah, okay, that's a nice question. So in terms of the first thing, is it principled? I will confess it's not a bright line rule. It will partake of judgment, and in different cases people can come down differently. In terms of principled versus strategic, I mean, I start from the proposition that the courts will have to define religion somehow because that's what the texts require. And the Supreme Court has made very clear that it still thinks religion is a special category. I just take that as a given. And then I say, okay, if we define religion, wouldn't it make sense to define it presumptively in communal terms? Both because I think that's kind of a conceptual thing. I think religion connotes something that is communal, but also for strategic purposes. I think I'd say it's both and. I mean, both because I think that as a concept, religion to my mind means something collective as opposed to simply one's individual spiritual path. And also because I think that treating religion as a collective entity brings a lot of benefits that I've described. For example, the Tocquevillian argument, religion is important because it operates as a check on the state. That's very important in the liberal polity, whether you're religious or not. Right? It doesn't really matter if you're a believer or not. Religion offers substantial benefits in that it encourages people to work together for common ends, and it provides a locus of authority that is different from one's identity as a citizen. Right? That's just kind of Tocqueville, that's standard liberal theory. I think if you view that as an important strategic point, which I do, communal religion does that, not individual religion. I mean, most despotic states would be happy if you're just kind of an individual eccentric who kind of believes strange things because you can't do anything. You can't threaten the state in any way. Maybe a totalitarian state would come after you, but most authoritarian states would be fine. You could just, okay, you're just a strange person with strange ideas. But if you get together and you form a critical mass of people who think the same thing, then you really can pose a threat to state power. And I think, because I think that's a very valuable thing, I tend to think we should think of religion in communal terms. Again, presumptively. I mean, I'm sort of faint-hearted about this, I will confess. I'm not willing to go all the way and say, no individuals. But that wouldn't be the way I would presume we should go. Does that answer your question? Maybe I didn't get your question.
I think it partly does. I guess so. I worked at Beckett for part of the summer, and one of their primary justifications for defending religious freedom is the duty of conscience, which, if, I guess, trying to extrapolate that to people who don't belong to a religious institution, it would seem like they would merit like the same protection, unless we're bringing in like these other strategic, so to speak, factors to say like, well, it's just really difficult to tell if they actually believe these things and they are obligated to follow their conscience because maybe they're lying, they just want to escape tax exemptions. Yeah.
Right, but I would say I'm happy endorsing both of those two approaches. I mean, say individual conscience is what we protect by free exercise of religion. Well, obviously I have some problems with that. Now, by the way, the free exercise clause is not the only clause in the Constitution. It's not like you can't, there's a free speech clause too, right? You also have an associational right under the Constitution. You have an equality right under the Constitution. There are other rights that maybe you can go to and try to enforce. Just, to my mind, it wouldn't be this one in particular. Yes, I'm sorry, what is your name?
Maggie.
And I'll come to you in a second. What is your name?
Maggie.
Maggie, okay.
Yeah, I'm curious, it seems, and you might have preempted the answer to this in your remarks, and I didn't catch it, but it almost seems like there would be a second sliding scale of what constitutes a religious community. I heard you use the phrase critical mass, people who agree with the same thing. If a judge were to adopt this approach and they're trying to use a sliding scale, I think you've probably heard this example a lot. Like, I think of like a Satanist group or something that has a group of 10 members. Like, would you say that's sufficient to be a critical mass or a religious community, or how do you really think of religious community?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I don't want to give an answer about the Satanists in particular, any group in particular.
Right.
But
Make sure you repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the question is, well, I think the question is sort of, well, assuming that you adopt a sliding scale definition of religion, okay, it has to be communal, but what does communal mean? How many people? Right, Maggie, you might add, how old does this tradition have to be? Centuries, 10 years, 5 years, whatever. I would say I can't give a categorical answer to that precisely because it is a scale that depends on different factors of judgment. But in the paper, I give 3 kind of examples of the situation. So the first one is the Thomas case. Thomas is from 1981, in which a member of the Jehovah's Witness faith refused to work on weapons. Right, and he wanted a religious exemption because he could not in good conscience work on weapons. Now, there was another Jehovah's Witness in the factory who did work on weapons. And apparently, there was a genuine intra-faith dispute among Jehovah's Witnesses about whether working on weapons is permissible. To me, it's perfectly fine. The person can say it's my religious conviction. That's a genuine intra-faith dispute. In Frizzy, there was another unemployment case. And in Frizzy, the claimant said he did not want to work on Sundays. He lost his job because he wouldn't work on Sundays. And he claimed a religious exemption because he said, I'm a Christian. I don't want to work on Sundays. And the court said, and he was not a member of any church. Didn't go to church, didn't belong to a church. He was a freestanding Christian, he said. And the court said, well, okay, that is a religious belief because that is a kind of common practice among Christians, a well-attested common practice that people don't want to work on Sunday. By the way, it's sort of funny that when this is going to be in a symposium edition of Old Journal, and the journal editors asked me for a cite for that proposition. I mean, what is the authority that Christians don't want to work on Sundays? And I thought, well, that kind of reflects where we are as a society. Maybe people just don't understand this anymore, that maybe Christians wouldn't want to work on Sundays. But anyway, in 1989, when this case was decided, the court kind of took judicial notice. That's not an uncommon thing. Both of those are fine to me. Then I talk about a few cases actually involving mandates. And there's one from Pennsylvania, a district court case from Pennsylvania, in which there were 4 plaintiffs. And 2 of them were Christians. They belonged to churches. One of them was a deacon. And they didn't want to wear masks. And they said, our Christian belief is that masks are a dishonoring of the Creator. Okay? A third person said, I don't belong to any church, but I also think that it shows ingratitude to Jesus to wear a mask. And then a fourth person said, I don't believe in any organized religion, I just think there's something out there, not just us, and that something out there makes me think masks are a bad idea as a kind of right. And for me, those are not strong religious claims. Because for the first 2, and these were not Christian Scientists, these were, I think, Presbyterians or Episcopalians. So, they're claiming that their religion, teaches them that masks are a dishonoring of Christ. There's nothing in those religions, and I say this purely as an empirical matter. I'm not judging whether someone is theologically right or wrong. There's really no connection with the religion they claim to belong to. Or the person who says, Jesus tells me that it's not grateful to him to wear a mask. Again, there's nothing in there that I can see. And the last one about, I just think there's something out there. To me, those aren't examples of a genuine intra-faith dispute. And they're not examples of a kind of well-attested communal practice that we all know about. So to me, they're not very strong claims for religion. Now I understand you get into trouble when you start talking like this as a court, because you don't want to be in the position of endorsing certain theological positions and rejecting others. And in the paper, I try to explain, I don't think that's what I'm doing. I'm not saying that Jesus wants you to wear masks as a theological point, and certainly a court has no locus to say that. But you can look at empirically what the religion teaches, and you can say there's just nothing in here that says anything like that, you know? So that's how I would look at it. I would give those cases as an example. I wouldn't start actually counting numbers or doing that, but I would say this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Yes, I'm sorry, what's your name?
No, Jacob. My question was going to be very similar. About, you mentioned sliding scale. At what point does, a subset of beliefs become a large enough mass to be considered? Like, to give an example, like with the Catholic Church, you might have sede vacantes, sede privationists, who don't believe the Pope is rightfully in place, and so you have a case where the Pope says something that directly contradicts their claim. How is that handled? Because they're a relatively large number that can be counted. You're getting to that. How do you treat that?
Okay, so Jacob, so the question was sort of following along to this. Well, but okay, if there's a sliding scale, how do you determine how many people is enough to make this a religion? And you give the example of the sede. I can't say it in Latin. The seat is empty, right? That's the idea, right? So there are some Catholics who are disappointed, as I understand it, who are disappointed with Vatican II and disappointed with the popes who have come after Vatican II, and their theory is there really isn't a pope at the moment because the pope is acting inconsistently with his responsibilities as the vicar of Christ. And what do you do with those people? Now, for me, personally, that wouldn't be a hard thing. That's a religion, too. I mean, there's a large group of people. They have churches. They have parishes. They have all sorts of things. I mean, again, I will confess, and this is a problem with any approach that is not a bright line approach, that I can't give you a categorical test for which groups are in and which groups are out. I would only say in my defense that a lot of law is like that. I mean, a lot of law involves judgment. And I mean, for example, take the strict scrutiny test, right? Strict scrutiny test says, okay, is there a compelling state interest, and is it the least restrictive means of doing so? Those are judgments. Even Smith, right? Smith says if a law is generally applicable and neutral, then no strict scrutiny is required. But how do we know what's generally applicable? We have to determine on what basis to compare things. There were lots of debates in the COVID cases about whether churches were like grocery stores or not. That took judgment. So I guess I would say somewhat shamefacedly that I'm in that camp. I mean, okay, it's going to take judgment. And personally, for me, I would err on the side of including people in the group of protected in the category. But I would draw a line at someone who says, something just tells me not to wear a mask. Even if he's totally sincere, by the way, if totally sincere, this person genuinely thinks that he has some access to some transcendent source of information and masks are a bad thing. I would say, okay, I respect that, but that's not a religion to me. Okay, I think there was a hand here, and then was there? No? Okay, then yes, between Jacob and Maggie.
Lily, right. And then we had Sammy over here.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry about that.
So in your answers to these questions, it sounds like you're using a text-based argument to say your religion isn't, the claim that these people are saying about masks isn't in the text, so you're judging the sincerity of their religion based on the text.
Can I interrupt you for a second? So the question is whether I'm actually judging sincerity here. I don't think I'm judging sincerity. If sincerity is defined as subjective honesty, right, the person is genuinely telling you what his or her convictions are. It's not a pretext. That's kind of not, I think I'm saying something different, which is what you may be entirely sincere in what you say, but the text of the Constitution refers to religion. And an individual, completely idiosyncratic view of things really isn't a religion. And then we get pushed back to the things that I was talking about with Meg, which is, well, then why would you do that? Why would you exclude this sincere person who believes what he or she is telling you? And I would say, well, because I think religion has some benefits that this person doesn't bring to the enterprise. Again, I'm really not trying to be, dismissive of this. I just think, words mean something, and not just that words mean, it's not just a semantic thing, it's that the religious communities offer something in a way that the isolated believer doesn't, in terms of benefiting society as a whole because of the Tocquevillian arguments and so on. Yeah, Sami?
Thanks so much for the talk. So my question is about your very careful hesitation to say that the courts are not making judgment in relation to, for example, the issue of Jesus and masks.
Right.
But I think think at some point the courts will have to make judgment in relation to these things. I was wondering, so I guess I know why that the courts have to be careful by stating certain type of theological claims about traditions, but can I take you from the Christian context to Muslim context,
Sure.
for example? So the case for the in Alabama, that's about the Sharia ban thing situation, and then the federal court kind of reversed it. The judgment was that
I'm
Sharia.
sorry, what's the case you're talking about?
The case is, I can't remember the case.
Okay.
But the court make a judgment that Sharia does not have a legal character.
Mhm.
That's a very interesting way to look and judge what exactly is that the court is dealing with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think the question is, okay, so my position is, I have said I don't want courts in the business of judging the theological truth of anything, but I think you can judge religion as an empirical fact. And the question is, the case is not, I want to know more about the case, but apparently there's a federal court which said Sharia is or is not.
It's not.
Is not. Well, so I'm not an expert in Islam in any way. That strikes me just empirically incorrect, right? To say that Islamic law is not law, that just sounds wrong empirically. I mean, there are centuries and centuries of legal reasoning in Islam,
Because
right?
for them, religion is private, so the law comes in the picture, so the understanding of religion.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's-
I see. So I do talk about this in the paper a little bit. I mean, I think courts should try to be as neutral and capacious as they can in understanding what a religion is. It's difficult, sure. I understand it's difficult. But then, as I say, you flip it around and say, okay, how about the other thing? So anybody look. I mean, what if someone comes in and says, I'm a believing Muslim, but I don't think that Muhammad was the prophet. But I'm still a Muslim, right? Well, I think, 99% of Muslims in the world say you're not a Muslim.
That's right.
I'm sorry, that's not Islam. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And I'm sure, by the way, there are people who in America might come up with claims like this, right? Some totally idiosyncratic claim. Okay, they bring it to the court. The court has to resolve this somehow. And I would say, I think that just as an empirical matter, looking at religion as a social fact, some claims are clear, some claims are not clear, and then in the middle, you kind of have to try to do your best. Now, I wonder, if I were a judge, would I really do that? As I think about it, you ask me this question, would I try to find a way to cheat somehow? Would I try to think, okay, well, yes, it's a religion, but there's a compelling interest or something? I mean, I can see how judges might do something like that, because if I actually I'm sitting and I'm writing the opinion, I would be a little cautious about saying something like this, and I might well think I've got to find some other way to resolve this. But luckily, I'm not a judge. I'm just an academic, and I can say what I want without consequence to anybody. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Joey?
Joey.
Yes, so if we're operating on the sliding scale, let's say on this side is like total institutional religion, here's just one idiosyncratic belief. If it were to fall pretty close to idiosyncratic belief, like pretty distant from institutionalized religion, but since it operates on this sliding scale, what do you think would offset that and be worthwhile for, okay, we should treat it as a religion anyway? What would
That's a
say?
great question. That's a great question. Well, I would give an example of like the Jehovah's Witnesses or like.
Do you mind repeating
Oh, I'm
the
so
great
sorry. I
question?
keep forgetting. So the question is from Joey. The question is, you're all identified now for posterity. The question is, if we take one pole is communal religion, clear communal religion, going back, the mind of man runneth not to the contrary, and the other is someone who just came up with a religion this morning in Starbucks. Okay, those are the two poles. Let's say you're kind of near the Starbucks guy, but you're kind of coming this way. How would you resolve that? And I guess I could give a good lawyer's answer and say, well, let's say there's a presumption in favor of this being a religion. Let's say it's hard to rebut that. I might say the example of Frazee, where this guy, well, that's not a great example, right? Frazee is where the guy says, I don't want to work on Sunday because I'm a Christian, even though I'm not a member of any church. But that's not quite your claim, is it? Your claim is something more like someone just, like something out there is, well, I would say something out there telling me no. I would say, gee, how far, now you're getting me into the categorical thing again, right? How far does it have to go on one side? And I want to kind of bracket that and say I'm not going to answer that because the whole nature of this is a sliding scale. You'd have to give me a good hypothetical and then I could tell you.
Can I reframe this question a little bit? Because part of what I heard him asking is, let's say you have the Starbucks guy.
Mm-hmm.
What other factors might tip you in deciding that the Starbucks guy actually is religious? He doesn't have community on his side,
Right.
but maybe he's got a bunch of other things.
Right.
What would those other things be?
Okay, good. Thank you. That's very good. Thank you. So, belief in a transcendence. Can he tie his belief to some community, even if he's not in that community? Is this something that there's some community of believers would recognize as a tenet of that religion? Those kind of factors. Thank you very much. Thanks for the clarification. I didn't get the question, I'm sorry.
Well, I meant not a friend of what he meant. I just thought that was interesting.
Oh, okay.
That is kind of what I was getting at.
Okay, thank you. There's that, Jeff?
Yes, sorry, I'm on the ground. How would you, kind of building off of that, how would you judge between value of community versus value of zeal? Say there's 4 people in the Starbucks and they really believe in it, and then you have a community 50,000 strong going for 50 years with the tenet of thou shalt not pay taxes, and they meet every year and talk about it and have a special day and have a lot of tenets that would kind of be associated with religion and are zealous in their own way, but that are kind of doing it with a more secular attitude in mind.
Okay, so this is Jeff. Jeff asks the question about, well, how does zeal factor into this? To the extent that there is just a small group of people, who just met at Starbucks this morning, but they really, really intensely believe in something. And you compare that to another group that's been around for 50, 60 years, but they're not quite as zealous, they don't care that much about this, they don't talk about it that much. I mean, I could fight the hypothetical, right? And I could say, if they just got together in Starbucks this morning, I mean, how zealous can they be, right? Their zeal hasn't been tested by time, and we don't really know if they're all that zealous yet, but that would be kind of cheating. That would be fighting the hypothetical. And again, unfortunately, the answer I have to give is, well, okay, look, that's one of the factors. There are other factors, by the way, in the analogical test. You would ask about belief in a transcendent being. You would ask about doctrines. You would ask about, systematic understanding of things. You'd ask about cultural practices. You'd ask how long these things have been going on. So I really don't think you can, and I understand the questions are very good questions. They're hitting right at the soft part of the argument. But I want to keep saying, well, I don't want to commit to any particular bright line test here. This would have to be determined in a casuistic way based on the various factors. Yes, that's Catherine.
Yes, and I guess maybe, and my apologies if you've already feel like you've covered this, but I guess just for me trying to clarify, so when you say if they can tie the specific belief to like an established religious tradition, but maybe they don't themselves ascribe to that particular organized religion, like in the case of like a non-denominational Christian who doesn't really attend a church, but they might pick and choose, things from different Christian denominations. I'm thinking specifically of like, I know there are cases of people who religiously object to being declared brain dead because they claim they have like specific religious beliefs about, if your heart is still beating, even if you have no brain activity, that's considered, they consider you to still be alive. And so I guess in cases like that, taking that as an example of like, would it be enough in your view for them to find, some support in some Christian denomination or other religion, whereas maybe they may not be a member of that specific religious tradition?
Okay, so Catherine asks the question about, well, what about someone who puts forward a religious belief, even though the person is not himself or herself a member of the community that has posited that belief, right? That has claimed that belief is revealed to them somehow. That strikes me like frizzy. That strikes me like the guy who says, I don't want to work on Sundays because I'm a Christian, even though he's not in any Christian church. So it's interesting as I think about it, the question's very interesting because I guess I would be comfortable with someone saying, I am positing this religious belief, even though I'm not formally a member of that. Because I think that again, you are in that case, you are treating religion as a collective entity and you will get the benefits that come from treating religion as a collective entity. Now, if someone says that I have this belief, this Christian belief, but then you find that he has excoriated Christianity all the time, and then you might wonder about, is he really being sincere, is he just making this up? But so all these questions they're all very good questions, and they all go to, I think, the line drawing problem. And maybe I can kind of answer all of them by saying, well, okay, I will confess there are line drawing problems here, but then you need to ask yourself, well, then what should a court do when someone just comes in and God told me not to get vaccinated. Excuse me, I won't even say God. Something out there told me I believe in something out there, like the Geerlings case that I talk about in the paper. What does a court do with that? Does a court say, okay, well, that's a religious belief, and we're going to honor that just like we will honor any other kind of religious belief? To me, that seems problematic. So just as I wouldn't want to categorically say no, never, I wouldn't want to categorically say yes, always. And that's what I'm trying to do in this paper, is trying to find a way to answer that question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Your paper largely focuses on defining religion in the free exercise context and people asking for exemptions or accommodations. But I'm wondering, how does it translate over to the Establishment Clause side of things? So for the students who haven't studied this or aren't aware of it, right, like, we don't agree on much regarding the Establishment Clause, by, as in we, I mean everybody in the legal world. But we knew one thing I think we agree on is like a teacher cannot coerce their religious beliefs onto their students, and coercion is not allowed. Under your test, though, the teachers, if it's an idiosyncratic believer, their religious beliefs would not be considered religion for free exercise purposes, but then would that allow them in the Establishment Clause context as a teacher to coerce their religious beliefs on students, if we're going to have kind of some parallel between how we're defining religion for the two clauses, which, as you know, it's largely the same word.
Yes.
I think there needs to be some
Exactly
parallel there.
Exactly the same word.
Yeah, so I'd be curious how you'd approach it from that angle.
I hadn't thought about it. So there was at one point, some scholars said that the definition of religion for free exercise purposes differs from the definition of religion for Establishment Clause purposes. I think Larry Tribe said that. That is no one talks about that anymore. That just, it didn't make a lot of sense. It's the same word in the same clause. How could it mean something different? And the question from Professor Collis is, well, okay, if religion is understood in collective terms, not idiosyncratically, what if we have a professor in a state school who gets up and tries to indoctrinate his or her students in the professor's idiosyncratic religious beliefs? And I guess my answer is, first of all, unfortunately, a lot of indoctrination goes on all the time, right? Quite apart from religious beliefs. I mean, political beliefs, philosophical professors have it's a real temptation to get up and kind of expatiate about your views, and you have a captive audience. You're not captive. You can leave anytime you want. But most students are stuck. They can't get out, and so that happens. I would say I'm not terribly concerned about one cranky professor getting up and indoctrinating students with it, because you're unlikely to have much effect, really. You think? I mean,
What about a high school teacher or a middle school teacher?
Right. Well, okay, that's someone giving his personal views. I mean, they're not religious views. I don't know. I mean, you, in some sense, you'd have to really police teaching and stop a lot of teaching in America if you say you can't share your personal philosophy with your students. And I don't know, it doesn't seem to me it has the same kind of coercive effect, at least not a long-lasting coercive effect. I mean, you all know when you leave the class, you don't have to parrot this stuff anymore, right? You can say what you want. So, but it's an interesting question. I mean, I didn't think about it. I'll have to think about that some more.
I think we have time for one more question, if there is one.
Meg?
We'll see if I can articulate it clearly. So it seems like I guess, I'm trying to get at what your justification would be for just for religious liberty in general, because it seems like you can argue it from 2 points under this sliding scale approach, whether it be like the value of religion itself to the person or the value to society, and it seems that this sliding scale organizational approach leans towards justifying protection of religion because it's beneficial to society. And is that correct?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that most of my arguments are about the value of religion to the society, which in a liberal society, as we have, the state has to be somewhat neutral about those things. Now, I also say in the paper, the reason why I am not willing to categorically exclude individual belief is precisely because honoring religious belief promotes personal dignity and autonomy and well-being, which is why I wouldn't want to just toss it out the window. But I also wouldn't want to just defer to whatever anybody says is my belief, and now look, I mean, look what happened to vaccine cases, right? I mean, you had vaccination programs, and people may feel very differently about them. But if you were to allow everybody with a kind of personal or philosophical objection to stop this kind of thing, you could really have administrative chaos. Now, you might answer, well, that would be handled by the compelling interest test. Now, you have a compelling interest in public health, and therefore, even if it is religious, so what's the downside? As I tried to say, I don't think the compelling interest test is necessarily without its biases also. So I'm not sure you could come to a neutral point of view on that. But yes, basically this paper does tend to lean on the social benefits of religion rather than the benefits to the individual person. Right.
Okay, can everyone join
me in giving
Professor Movsesian? Thanks everyone. We've got the Nuri Turkel event on October 21st over at the LBJ School. So we look forward to seeing you there.